Hey guys, spent the morning in the studio throwing water around, making splashes, and this is the final image. Let's jump into Photoshop and see how we put it all together. You're running out of both physical and virtual memory. This is a poor show. Look at this. Devastating. Let's click free up and see what happens. Okay, guys, while that's doing its business, let's start this tour. Right, here we are in the file, and this is the finished product, but what I'm going to do is turn everything off above the base plate, and we'll start at the bottom and work our way up, and hopefully we'll see a few interesting things about how this product was put together. Now, let's start here. We've got a mask that looks like this. So anywhere that's white, we're allowing you to see that, and anywhere that's black, it's being kind of concealed. It's just like deleting it, but I can always get rid of this mask or alter the mask so those pixels haven't actually been deleted, and in fact, there they all are. So if you don't know much about masking, just hit subscribe, hit the bell. I've got some really good advanced masking techniques. So I'll be doing a few extra tutorials on those things. In the meantime, if we turn that off, you can see I've set up this back plate. Now, in an ideal world, what I would have done is mask this out and then set up a duplicate layer and just filled it. I would have duplicated the layer just to be on the safe side. You know, you want to work non-destructively, but I would have just filled in these gaps with content aware fill. But just for no reason that I can really explain, did a horrendous job of filling in this gradient. So I ended up just manually making a backplate that matches this exactly. So if you're interested in how I did that, let me know. But it was basically a bit of a fist fight with Photoshop, really. I didn't enjoy it. So there you go. There's my backplate, and there's my floating product sitting on top of it. Now, because of the dropsies that we did here, we kind of accidentally destroyed the product. So it was glued to this C-stand boom arm. All of the lights and everything were set up. The camera was on the studio stand. Everything was in place, ready to go. Walked away from it and got a cup of tea. So I'm on the other side of the studio, and the glue failed. Hot glue gun just failed. And look at this. Absolutely destroyed. Destroyed. Look at this horrible mark just here. Fell on the floor and skidded along the ground once it hit the concrete floor of our studio. Destroyed the branding. Destroyed this letter E just here, and just smashed in a massive concrete scuff in the top of the cap. So that was pretty emotional. That's pretty upsetting, but it just means a bit of frequency separation. So again, if you're not 100% comfortable with frequency separation, hit subscribe. I will do my best to bring you up to speed. But basically, I always set up my frequency separation this way. I've got turn off the high frequency. I've got my blurred layer here, and I'm actually working on this layer above it, which is clipping in. And that means, again, it's just non-destructive. I can always alter this layer, but I've still got a copy of my original directly underneath. And you can see what I've done. I've just worked with the tonal values. There's no detail in this because it's all blurred out. I did have to do a pretty complicated mask for this. Again, I will bring you up to speed with masking. Just subscribe. I'll do it in the next couple of weeks. I've got some really advanced masking techniques that make this kind of thing super easy. But what I've done is mask that in, painted the color in manually, and painted the black in manually, fixed up this E, and then these fixes were super easy to do with a mixer brush. So here, we've got a little bit of light reflecting off the C-stand that's glared into the bottom of the glass here. We've got this damage in the corner, this tonal variation here, and this is that horrible scuff. Now, also, I didn't really like the way this resolved itself to the top of the cap. So I've just used, again, the mixer brush, and by holding down shift, what I've done is sort of clicked here, held down shift and clicked up here, drawn a selection mask so only pixels inside that are altered, which meant I managed to maintain this nice hard edge and essentially just dragged those pixels along in a nice straight line. So I've got a much nicer cap than I had it in the original capture. Now, secondly, we've got a high frequency layer. And again, I've got the original just here, the high median. It's called high median because I've I've made it out of the low median. If that's confusing, just hit me up in the comments and I'll explain it to you, and I'll link you when I do the frequency separation tutorial. But it makes sense to me. I've used median as my blur, and this is the low frequency that I get from that median, and this is the high frequency that I get from that median. And without it, it's all blurred. With it, it's nice and clean, and this means I can turn on and off the work that I've done there, and this was all just done with a clone stamp. And what I would have actually done, more likely than not, is turn off everything underneath it and just work directly on the detail. So if I grab the clone stamp, I can just copy some of this texture and put it over any of the marks and scratches that I've got here, for example. By cloning here directly onto here, I'm just taking detail and leaving the tonal work underneath still intact. So that gives us finally a nice clean floating product, and that's quite a nice picture by itself, to be fair. So what I've done after that is I have taken my eyedropper tool and taken a sample of the color that makes up the actual product, and I've made a solid color layer that runs over the top of my image. Oh, sorry, I put that in the wrong place. Let me drag that up here for you. Now, I can't invert a solid color layer like that, so I've had to rasterize that layer and just press Control I. Oh, did it not rasterize? Let me try that one more time. Hey, what's going on? Rasterize the layer. It is rasterized. Sorry, I'm actually pressing Control. I'm on a Mac. It should be Command I. So Command I on a Mac, Control I on a PC. So now this color is the exact opposite color of this color here. So Control I is invert. It's just invert. I've just inverted the sort of pinky foundation color and come up with the exact opposite of it. So that's a really neat little trick. Let me get rid of that layer to give you the exact scientific opposite to the color you're working with. And then by adding that in using screen, you'll notice the background gets notably lighter because I've used screen. I decided to go with that. I put it on originally with overlay mode, and I just felt it was a bit too contrasty. So we've gone with screen, which is lightening things up nicely. And the product really sort of pops out now. So this is white paper, white tracing paper with an ungelled flash behind it. It should be pretty close to white and pretty close to neutral in the grays. But if we want the product to pop, this makes all the difference in the world. So that's something to bear in mind. If you're setting up backgrounds and gradients and things for your product, a really good place to start with the background color is the exact opposite color. Okay, we're almost done, guys. Let's add some splashes. So I shot about 120 splashes. And then I just went through and made really junky masks of the shapes that I liked. I threw away anything that was tatty. I probably brought in about 30 splashes into this file, and then I have masked them out. So if I disable these masks and turn on my splashes, you'll see what a state it is. We've got this and this and this. And basically I've done a really junky mask around them all, and then just, sat with a cup of tea and layered a few of them up on top of each other and came up with splashes that I think work nicely together. Now I've masked them out, and again, you can see this mask allows this splash to come through. So if we just turn the others off for a second, just in case you're not fully comfortable with masks, here's my mask. Anything that's white shows through. Anything that's black is hidden away. And if I turn it off, you can see the image that's underneath it. The speckles here, incidentally, sorry, are masks that are applied to the group. At the end, there was a few little drips floating in the air that I just wanted rid of, and I couldn't be bothered to work out which layer they're on. So I've masked the whole group also. But this is the original photograph. This is the mask. And this is the photograph with the mask applied. So I can now just pop that splash in and out of my image, and this one, which I felt matched it pretty well. And this, I just quite liked this little swish of water at the top. So that's splash set 1. And this is a set of splashes number 2. I just like the way, I felt like the fact that this gave me this S curve, that was just a gift. I couldn't turn that down. So I ended up making 2 images out of this file. So on top of this, this is splash 1. This is the sharpening for splash 1, and we'll have to zoom in to really notice the difference. You're probably pretty comfortable with sharpening, I should guess, but if you're not, I'll just show it to you quickly. This is my sharpening layer. What it is a high pass filter. So I've done, I've selected all the layers below, just highlighted the top layer, Control, Alt or Option, Command or Control, Alt or Option, depending on what system you're on, Shift and E, and that gives me, you can see here, a clone stamp. If I solo that up, it's everything below this layer. And then I've just come up to Filter, and where is it? Is it in Other? Other, High Pass, and chosen a radius that looks pretty tasty. That'll do for now. I'm just looking for an outline around the detail that hasn't got too much of this kind of haloing going on. That's a bit much. And once I've got that, let me just delete that there because that looked pretty horrible in the end. Go. It's just set to soft light, and it just adds a little bit of extra contrast around the edges of the smallest details. And we refer to that as sharpening. Now you can see it does a pretty good job. The two most common blend modes for this are soft light and overlay. There's no real hard and fast rule. Overlay tends to be a bit more aggressive, and you can see it draws a slight white halo around all of the letters. No thank you. So we went with soft light on this occasion, and we found that gave us really nice sharpening to the splash. You can see it even in this this area here, adding a little bit, adding a little bit of additional sort of punch and contrast to the splash. And that is the end of our image. Now, I've got two extra layers here. I just want to show you this. I've got this red layer here at the bottom, and this was used just for this purpose, just to make sure that I wasn't being an idiot and leaving anything in there, because I actually had to manually draw around these shapes and mask them with a pen. So this is a hand-drawn mask. Can you believe it? I've got hundreds of really advanced masking techniques to show you, and on this occasion there was just nothing for it other than pulling out a pen, a literal Wacom pen, not the pen tool, and drawing around the mask. So if you are doing any masking, this is a really sensible thing to do. Chuck a big fat red layer behind it and you can clearly see what you're up to. The other thing is this: if you're not using this solar curve, you should put this into your workflow immediately, especially if you're a product or portrait photographer. When I click this on, look at what it does. Actually, it's telling me straight away that I'm looking at Splash 2 and using Splash 1's sharpening. You can see all of this high pass. If I turn that off, it's barely visible. I mean, it's pretty visible, but let me swap those two sharpening layers over so that's gone. I'll turn this back on again, and what it does is just really highlights the smallest details, the smallest errors in your file. So if I turn off the frequency separation, for example, look at how obvious all of these specks suddenly become. I mean, they couldn't hide from you. There's a couple of little specks here or there that you might otherwise miss if you weren't referring backwards and forwards to this solar layer. So this is pixel peeping in the extreme, but it stops you from missing anything. So you've got this solar layer on the top, but it's actually just a check layer. We'll get rid of that. And any of you who have, let's turn that frequency separation back on, seen my previous tutorials will know that I'm always going to finish with a little bit of contrast set to luminosity. In this case, hardly any. You see I've pulled that down to 10%. So just a tiny bit of extra punch. And finally, just checking the output levels. You can see my histogram here. My whites never quite make it to being pure white. So I can drag the pure white points back down and meet them where they are. And I've just slightly clipped out a couple of the black points. And this, like, looking at your histogram is a good reference, but it's not really very useful for visualizing what's happening. So I'm holding down Alt or Option and dragging the black point up, and you can see those pixels that are pure black just appearing in the image here. Same thing with the white point. If I drag it to the right and hold down Alt, only a few tiny speckles of pure white in this image, but as I drag this in, I can see that some of my highlights are now going to make it to being pure white. If I drag it right down, that's pure white in the center now, no detail there at all, blown out highlights. But if I meet it just about at the end of my histogram, I know I'm using the full dynamic range for this file. So guys, that's that. I'm going to show you the final crops. This is my final crop for the S-curve. I just tried to get it centrally aligned in a 4x6. And for the big messy splash, there's too much negative space on this side. So this is a nice Instagram square crop. And that is the final result. So I know it's a bit of a lightning tour. I'm not really going into much detail in the techniques, but if you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments. I will be posting some more detailed tutorials on masking, luminosity masking, working with a pen tool for masking and selecting, and frequency separation. So if you're interested in those things, hit subscribe, hit the bell to get a notification. If you really don't want to subscribe and hit the bell, you can just leave a comment with a question if you've got one. But yeah, hopefully that was useful for you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.